On this video I'm going to go through the setup of the CEE-LINE echo sounder in Hydromagic software, and also I'm going to demonstrate a typical GPS setup in Hydromagic 2. Now this video is only relevant for the CEE-LINE running version 3.1 firmware and connected with the USB-A cable with the black strain relief. Now the first thing to do when setting up the new CEE-LINE is to install the CEE-LINE Connect software, and then you can interface with the CEE-LINE through this portal. Now many of the required control features that you need are in Hydromagic as well, so once you've got everything set up in the first place you don't really need the CEE-LINE Connect software. But certainly in the first instance you want to go in through CEE-LINE Connect and make sure the settings are appropriate. So if we open CEE-LINE Connect, we see that we have a connect area at the top here. So the CEE-LINE is actually plugged into the USB port here, and will show, you can see it shows here 2 COM ports with the serial number of the CEE-LINE here. Now this part of this particular USB cable setup is it will generate 2 COM ports you can use to access the device, which means you can access the CEE-LINE from 2 places at once, which means you can be acquiring data in one software package, and at the same time you can be viewing data or making changes within CEE-LINE Connect. That's the reason for the 2 COM ports that you can see here. So we're just going to pick one of them and hit connect. So here we can see the CEE-LINE is now active, and the sliders and the indications here, the drop downs, allow you to change the settings. Now we'll start off with the output format. So typically the default format will be NMEA DBT, but in this particular instance when we're connecting with Hydromagic, it really doesn't matter so much which of these output formats we select, because the Hydromagic input is going to be looking at data from a different source. So what we just would be doing typically here is leaving the NMEA DBT as a output format, and the factory default baud rate for CEE-LINEs used in all different applications is 9600, but in this case we're using the USB-A cable. The baud rate is going to be irrelevant, so no matter what we put in the baud rate, it's going to work. Although that is not the case if you're using the CEE-LINE with other types of acquisition. Only for Hydromagic is this the situation. So here it's telling me, would I like to change the baud rate, and what that's going to do is it is going to affect the actual communication with the CEE-LINE Connect software. It may not change any connections with Hydromagic, but when we're using the CEE-LINE Connect, then our baud rate has changed, so now it's asking us if we're sure about that. And so we've changed the baud rate, and now it's disconnected, but it's clever enough just to reconnect again. So it's switched the baud rate here to 9600 and reconnected. So this baud rate here obviously is important potentially for the software you're connecting to, and also for the CEE-LINE Connect itself. So also here we can see our maximum depth, where we can either enter a number in here, or we can use the plus or minus. Ping rate, we will choose a ping rate of 10 in this instance. The CEE-LINE version 3.1 goes to a maximum ping rate of 20 pings per second. We'll go back to 10. So we can change our sound velocity in here. And the one thing to note about the maximum depth here is that it's a hard limit. So if you have a maximum depth of, in this case, 21 feet, and your actual depth goes to 21.1 feet, then the data will disappear. So you have to be careful to ensure your maximum depth is relevant to the survey that you're doing. Maybe your expected survey depth plus 50% would be a good safe level to put the maximum depth at. It doesn't need to be just slightly over what you're actually surveying. You don't need to pick 22 feet if you're expecting 20 feet of depth. So you just don't want to have a maximum depth of 100 feet if you're only going to be in 20 feet of water. It helps the echo sounder out, and also it enables you to get a better resolution on your data. So if we look at our settings for our individual high and low frequency, I have a single frequency only in this case, so the high frequency is enabled. The mode, which would be the bottom tracking mode, would typically always remain in auto. If we change this to manual, it means you can change yourself the pulse cycles, gain and threshold here, something that would be very rare for anyone to actually do, but it does give you the capability. Shallow mode would be essentially a low volume mode where you would use this if you had very shallow water, particularly if you had a highly reflective bottom surface. So this will minimize double echoes and issues with a reflective bottom environment. But 95% of the time, it's just going to stick in auto mode. And down here we have our time varied gain. The standard would be log 10. You can change the amount of gain that's applied as the depth increases, but the default and our best performance is with log 20. Frequency of the transducer 200 kilohertz. Can't do anything about that, so leave it at 200. The blanking distance, which will be the minimum measurable distance, this is going to set how shallow you can go in your soundings, and you can't go less than the 0.66 feet limit here. And as you go into deeper and deeper water, the blanking, you may need to increase the blanking to reduce the ringing noise at the surface. But typically, shallow water surveys, you can minimize the blanking. The draft distance the transducer is below the water surface. This can be added here in CEE-LINE Connect or in Hydromagic. Typically, it will go in here in CEE-LINE Connect. And I'll come back to the draft setup. But you will measure the distance from the transducer face to the water surface, and that will go in here. Let's say it's a foot down. Index is a transducer offset, which is almost never applied, especially to a 200 kilohertz transducer, but there is an index offset field in here. So now we have our echo sounder configured how we would like. We can also see the water column echogram. That's a new feature with the 3.1 C lines. And in this case, the echo sounder transducer is just in a bucket of water, so there's really not much to see. So we have here our water column echogram, which isn't much of a water column, but if I move the transducer up and down, you can just about see the depth changing. So this is a water column view of echo intensity from the surface down to the bottom. It's pretty meaningless in this instance because all we have is spurious noise here. That's our bucket of water's only got about a foot of water in it. But this will give you a view of your data as you are conducting the survey. So you can have this as a viewer running in the background, even if you're using other software that would not be able to record this. It's useful as a viewer. So now I'm going to open up Hydromagic, and the first thing I'm going to do is generate a new project. So here we have the project name. To fill that in, and I will put the project on the desktop. And the map projection, here we need to select our projection. And if you have used Hydromagic a few times, you'll have all your recently used projections here, which makes it easy to navigate to the common projections. Otherwise, you can go to sorted by area and look at the projections for the location that you're at. So if I come down here, I can pick out US California NAD 83 Zone 6, which is what I'm going to use here with the units of survey feet. So we have our project created. You can see at the bottom here in the indicator bar, the projection, and here we've got an XY cursor position as we move the cursor around, and also the units. Here we can switch between the navigation data, showing our data streaming in, and the Project Explorer, which has all our project headings where our data is saved and how we manage our editing. So the two tabs here at the side, Project Explorer, navigation data. So you can hit here the options and you can select which of these items here you would like to see, and it depends on the resolution of your computer screen. Yeah, if you have a small resolution, you can maybe take some of these out or add them or just tidy things up. But anyway, it's pretty straightforward. You can just remove the items you don't need here. So let's just add a couple of things in here. Refresh interval here is the refresh time for the screen display for your boat position. So 500 milliseconds, a couple of updates per second. It really doesn't matter which one you pick here. You definitely don't want to be going up at 2.5 second refresh rate. That'll be pretty difficult for navigation, but any of the lower numbers here, you get a good refresh rate on the screen. And we can increase the font or decrease the font size as well. So here we have at the top we have our menu bar, and there's quite a few menu items that are hidden, but the most common ones are shown here by default. With the small resolution screens, then we may have to remove some of these. If you have a real small screen like a tough book, then these icons will quickly run off the edge of the screen. The key thing you want here is you want this depth colors on the screen. So this is the one you want to be seeing on the right of the screen. To adjust any of these, you just hit add or remove buttons. Then we can pick all of these different buttons that you may or may not need. Okay, so the first thing we will do here in Hydromagic is to set up the device. So we have options preferences, which is where you need to remember pretty much everything is located. It's either going to be on a right click on the Project Explorer, or it's going to be here in options preferences. So we can go to options preferences, and it comes up as devices here, and we can add a device. So we're going to add our CEE-LINE plugin for Hydromagic, and it comes up with our connection type. So here we see it's going to pick up our COM ports that might be available. We only have 2 at this point. If you have other devices on your computer, you may well see other COM ports. And if there's any confusion about what's what, you would have to pick them individually to see which one is going to work, or you can maybe go to the device manager and look at the ports list, and then you can use that to determine which of the COM port you need to use here. But it will come up with this USB serial device, so it should be fairly obvious which one you will need to pick. And there will always be 2 consecutive COM ports associated with the CEE-LINE. So you'll have COM3, COM4, or COM1, COM2, whatever it might be. So we're just going to pick COM3. And if you remember, we had 9600 baud rate on our setup for the CEE-LINE Connect. So you might think, okay, well, we need to pick 9600, so which would be a good choice. And we had it set up at DBT, so that all looks good. So we're going to run through it here and set it up in this way. But when we're using Hydromagic with our echogram feature, then we're actually not going to be using a DBT. We're going to be using a different output format, which is this NMEAC echogram. And that's what I was saying about the independence of the output format set in the CEE-LINE Connect and the baud rate. Those 2 factors aren't relevant when you pick the NMEAC echogram input format. Now, when we select any of the others, then you do need to worry about your baud rate and matching your format. So in the first instance, we'll just go through and set up the NMEA DBT at the 9600, which is how the CEE-LINE is configured. And after a little while, you'll see the green check mark, and the depth is appearing here. And so, yeah, if we hit monitor, we'll see the DBT data coming through, depth flow transducer. So I'll close this window here. And what I'm going to do now is go back to the configuration of the C-line. And you can see here we have the configuration set up with a NMEA DBT output with a serial speed here of 9600. And so what we're now going to do is change this to the setup that we would typically have when using Hydromagic. And now with other acquisition like Trimble Access or other types of software, Carlson, you have to be careful to match the serial speed and the output protocol to ensure your data is received. But in this case with Hydromagic, once we change this format to NMEAC, now we don't need to worry about the output format or the baud rate, because this data is going to be received independent of that. Also, a water column echogram is going to be transmitted through from the C-line to Hydromagic. So this will be our standard setup when using the C-line with Hydromagic, whilst using the USB-A black strain relief cable. So we hit OK here. So now we have our plugin working with Hydromagic and the C-line outputting the echogram. You'll see here actually that the depth has increased to 1.8, and that is because now the draft has been incorporated in the output from the C-line. So when we use a DBT output message, that's a depth below transducer, which does not have a draft. So even if the draft is input in C-Line Connect, if the output message that's being used is DBT, that draft will be ignored. The other output messages, DBS, depth below surface, for instance, will incorporate the draft. But independent of what output message you select on the C-Line Connect software, if you select this NMEAC echogram protocol, you will have the draft included in it. So now we can close this for the time being. And now I'm going to just quickly open up C-Line Connect again so we can see both software packages running at the same time. So here's C-Line Connect opening. And now we saw the two COM ports, but COM3 was used to connect to Hydromagic. So if we tried that one, it won't work. So I'm going to connect on COM4 with C-Line Connect. I'm going to close it down a little bit so it can fit it in the screen. So here we can see our settings. We can actually change the settings in C-Line Connect whilst Hydromagic is connected. Now, some of the settings we can change in Hydromagic as well, so we may not need to do this, but at this point I'm just demonstrating the two simultaneous COM ports opening in the software. So for instance, if we wanted to change the maximum depth, we could do that in here, and that will be adjusting it whilst Hydromagic is still running. So if I go to the draft here, I can reduce the draft to 0, and now you can see the depth on Hydromagic has gone down to 0.8 because the draft has been removed. And so I'll just disconnect here from C-Line Connect. So the next thing we can look at is the echogram view in Hydromagic. So I go to View, Echogram High. This is showing us our water column view. Again, it's going to be fairly ridiculous because we just have a bucket of water here. So I can zoom in a little bit, and we can see here our water column echogram. If I move the transducer up and down, we can see the depth moving. Here in this way we have it configured. We can see depth points. Here the red dots, which is the digitized depth, and the intensity here, which is the bottom return, underneath it. So the red dots will be tracking the very top of the bottom return here shown on the echogram. And this echogram is a vital quality control tool that you can use to ensure soundings are accurate, and you can use it in editing to remove spurious soundings or soundings affected by vegetation or other issues that without the echogram you just have no idea about in the first place, let alone the ability to edit them out. So here we can see this new feature that is added for the 3.1 CEE-LINE, a really important and beneficial echogram here. And it's available on 2 channels. So if we have a dual frequency echo sounder, we can view our low frequency as well. And of course we have no data. So these echogram and all windows can be resized. If you move them around the screen, they'll actually kind of locked to various different places, which can be a little bit annoying. So you just need to be careful where you put it. Usually you'll just have this floating. So that's the echogram. On the setup options for the echogram itself, we click on colors. You can actually remove the default actually is to remove the digitized depths as points, so make it a little bit cleaner to remove the points when it first opens up. When you've installed Hydromagic, this will be unchecked. So if you want to see your digitized points in your echogram display, then you have to go in and check this. And you can change the range of the minimum maximum the depth of display. These color bands, this black, red, yellow is quite good, so you would be recommended to leave that as it is. And also the percentage of maximum intensity, 5% minimum. It's not going to be reporting any signal back below 5%. That's to remove a really low level noise to give you a nice clean image here. But you can change that. But say if we put 1% here, yeah, you see a little bit more noise appears. Kind of just makes things a little bit more messy. So it's nice just to keep that at 5. Okay, so that's the echogram. Now, if there is another depth view that you can look at called the echo sounder, which is the only way you can look at the CEE-LINE data if you're not using the USB-A cable with the echogram. So if you're using regular DBT input, then you would have to look at the echo sounder, which is just the digitized points. So there's no water column intensity here. So this is a CEE-LINE output pre-version 3.1 echogram. So you don't have the sonar intensity to give you your quality control on these digitized points. Now we're in the bucket of water, so we don't really need it. But when you're in a natural environment, then you can get good benefits from that. But this is the echo sounder view as opposed to the echogram view. So we'll close that for now. So that's our CEE-LINE echo sounder configured. So next we can do is add a GPS. In this case, I have an EMLID Reach RS Plus GPS, a fairly basic differential grade GPS, and it's perched next to the window in the office here, so we can just about see some satellites. And first thing to do is I actually need to pair this device with the computer on Bluetooth. So I'm going to go to the Bluetooth menu, add the device. Okay, so Reach RS. Okay, so that's good. So now we have our GPS device paired. So we can add it in Hydromagic. So we go back to Options Preferences and then Add. And we're going to add the GPS. And the GPS is going to be a standard NMEA 0183 input. So we're going to pick one of the plugins. And the connection type will be serial. It's coming in through Bluetooth. And so we have here now 2 new ports have appeared, 6 and 7. So USB serial device, there's a 2 for the CEE-LINE and 2 more have appeared from the GPS we just paired over Bluetooth. So one of these is going to be active for the communication. I'm going to guess COM7. I think both of them don't work. I think you have to get the right one for this type of GPS. So I'm going to hit OK, and we'll soon see. So here the hourglass means it's not connected. So sometimes with Bluetooth it can take a few seconds to come through, but that doesn't look like it's working. So what we're going to do is go back here and go to COM6. And so yeah, now we're good. So now I'm going to go back in here to the NMEA plugin. And for this Bluetooth connection, the serial speed shouldn't have any impact, so you can change the serial speed to whatever you like when you've got a Bluetooth connection. There is a little bit of a glitch here currently in this particular version of Hydromagic I'm using. I imagine by the time you get to try this, it'll be fixed. But if I was to change the baud rate to 9600, it may give you this exclamation point and stop the connection. If I select it again, hit configure, just hit OK. So go in and re-up the baud rate selection, then the connection will be re-established. So it's just a little glitch, but basically the configuration of baud rate when you're using a Bluetooth connection should have no impact. So when we go down here to the NMEA 0183 settings, sentences, this is the sentences that Hydromagic will decode and use in your data. So this is the entire list of NMEA messages. And as you can determine the NMEA output messages from your GPS, there's no reason really to start removing messages in your Hydromagic setup. Typically you just use them all, just have them all selected, and whatever comes in, it's going to record. So that's the safest way of doing it. So we'll just leave that unmolested. So yeah, we hit OK, and we have our lat long easting northing and our sounder depth and elevation. And now we can go and look at the setup of the GPS. And to do that, in this particular instance, I have to open a web browser and type in the IP address of the GPS so I can get to its control portal. So when I bring the control portal up, I can just look at the output messages that are coming from the GPS so we can ensure that it's configured correctly. Now, while that's happening, we can go back into our options, preferences, devices, and if we go to the GPS, we can actually hit here monitor, so we can look from the Hydromagic end at what messages are coming through. So I just pause this for a minute. We can see our GGA position messages coming in. Here's the timestamp, so 5 per second looks like. So 5 position messages, and we have other informational messages, GSA, VTG, so heading speed, GST, satellite information, ZDA, time. So this looks like it's a good message setup which is being received, so we're not getting spurious messages. So for the time being, I'll just close that. Now I have the GPS portal here. So we can see what the GPS itself is doing. So we have 24 satellites with not great quality, because it's at the office window. So on whatever GPS you have, what you'll be looking for is the NMEA output. So the NMEA menu, or the output messages, so you can select what the GPS is going to give you coming out. And it's unlikely it's just going to magically be outputting the correct messages. It may not be outputting any messages at all. Worst case, it's not even active because you haven't paid Trimble or Leica for the NMEA output activation. So that's always something that's a bit sneaky. So in this particular GPS, this case, we have position streaming 1 menu, and under position streaming 1 we have the Bluetooth channel. The format is NMEA, which is always what we want to have outputting from that port. Message type GGA, which is our position, 5 Hertz, 5 times per second. GST, which is our satellite informational message, we don't need that at 5 Hertz, so we'll have pick 1 Hertz. Again, more informational messages at 1 Hertz, and the heading speed at 1 Hertz also. RMC is a sort of duplicate message, similar as GGA, so we don't need that. And this EBP message also is turned off. So we would want to eliminate duplicate messages. We want to make sure our position output is fast enough, so we don't want to have it coming out at 0.1 Hertz. I mean, that would be ludicrous. In fact, Hydromagic probably wouldn't even register that as receiving position at a 10-second interval. So 5 Hertz is a good one. 1 Hertz is okay, a little bit slow, but better than nothing. So, and this particular receiver is not activated for position messages faster than 5 Hz. So this all looks good. We kind of knew that already because we'd already looked at the Hydromagic input side of things. But yeah, when you're setting up your GPS, this is often where there are trouble because the NMEA output is not being properly configured. The GPS is connected to Hydromagic or whatever it might be, the HiPAC, whatever software it is, and nothing appears. That's because the GPS is not set up in the first place to output the NMEA position. Its GPS receivers are almost certainly not going to, out of the box, output a GPS position via NEMA, so it has to be configured. So I will close this down. We're finished with this for now. So we have our position and our depths. Now, in terms of setup, well, what do we need to do? Well, we need to ensure that our offsets are appropriate. So in this case, we have the draft, which is the distance from the water surface to the transducer, and we have the antenna height, which is the distance from the water to the antenna. So we have two components to our rod height. So doing traditional land surveying, you have a rod height, one measurement, but here we have two, the draft and the antenna height. And it doesn't really matter what the draft and antenna height numbers are, if assuming you're using an RTK solution, but the total of those two numbers needs to add up to the total distance between the antenna, GPS antenna, and the bottom face of the transducer. So in Hydromagic, we can go into our options preferences and go to RTK, and here is where we can enter our antenna height. You can see here we've already checked the box, use RTK for real-time tide. So if you do not have this checked, we hit OK, then we're not going to be measuring a real-time elevation. Data is still going to be recorded, but it's not going to be displayed here. I mean, it's still stuck on this previous number, but if we were to close down and open it up again, this will be 0. So I'm kind of fooling Hydromagic at the moment. I've only got an autonomous fixed solution, but it's giving me elevation, and I've used a little bit of a fiddle to demonstrate that. But if you're using an RTK, then you don't need to worry about that. So we're using an RTK real time. We have an antenna height we put in here. So this antenna height, you could potentially just put your complete the total distance from the bottom face of the transducer to your antenna in here. You could put the whole distance with a single offset. That would mean you did not have any draft, so all of your depths would be referenced to the bottom of the transducer, not the water surface. So in this case, I'm just going to put an antenna height of 5 feet. Let's say our total distance is 6 feet. We'll have a 5-foot antenna height and a 1-foot draft. So we'll put a 5-foot antenna height. Now, to get a proper elevation, we need our geomodel. So we can select geomodels from a list of geomodels, and if they are shown in red, it means they are not loaded. If they're black, they will be loaded. A new Hydromagic installation will have no geomodels because it does not come with the world's entire list of geomodels. So what you have to do in that case is to click to get to a downloadable list of geomodels on the Hydromagic website, and I have done that, and here are the list. So then you can go to the geomodel that you would like and download that file, wherever you might be. It's pretty straightforward. Already downloaded some of these. So you pick the file you want, download it, and then when you have downloaded it, you've got this handy button here that says Open Geoids Folder, and that will open the Hydromagic folder. It's kind of a little bit hidden down in the depths of your computer, so it will open this folder, and then you can just go to your downloaded file and paste the file in here, and then you would simply close this box, our dialog box, and open it again, and your geomodels will appear. So in this case, I'll just pick a geomodel, Conus Grid 5, which is where I am. So this will now apply the geomodel to our our GPS data and give us an orthometric height in our elevations. So you see when numbers change, so we put a proper geomodel in. And it's going to be all over the place because we don't actually have a GPS of a RTK fixed solution. But as I said, I'm fiddling it, so it's just showing us here. Now we put our antenna height in Hydromagic, but we don't have the draft in. So let's say we have a 1 foot draft and a 5 foot antenna height for a total of 6 feet. If we wanted to add the draft, we can do that. Now, one way we can do that is with this CEE-LINE control portal. So when we open up the CEE-LINE, well, when we install the CEE-LINE plugin, this CEE-LINE control dialog box will be hidden down in the underneath the main program icon. So it won't appear automatically, but if you hover over the program icon on your taskbar, this will appear. So it's a bit hard to see because I don't have the video recording that section of the screen. But so if we hover over the Hydromagic icon, you will see this CEE-LINE control is active, and you can highlight it and it will appear. So the CEE-LINE control window here allows you to change some of the settings, or the important settings, that you could change also in CEE-LINE Connect. So what do we want to do here? So we want to add a one foot draft. So we can do that in this CEE-LINE control window. Unfortunately, we have a units issue a little bit here, so we've got to put it in meters and not feet, so we have to do a little conversion when we're using the CEE-LINE control. But we can put our draft in, whatever that might be, and then hit apply, and that's going to add the draft to our depth over here. So same thing with a blanking distance, something you would not be really ordinarily changing, but the minimum blanking distance is about 0.6 feet. So we can apply our blanking distance also in Hydromagic. Most importantly, really, is the range up here. So this is the maximum depth. So we can change our maximum depth for our survey in CEE-LINE in Hydromagic using the CEE-LINE control window. So we're applying these changes here, which means you don't have to open up the CEE-LINE Connect. And yeah, sound velocity as well, of course, and the echo sounder mode. Switch between the shallow mode and the auto mode here. So we have our 1 foot draft in the CEE-LINE, and we have our 5 foot antenna offset in Hydromagic. So you could be very careful about your draft and your antenna height to make sure that you have everything properly set up. And you can close that, and it will disappear. It won't, and I'll bring it back up again, but you'll see it won't have an X here. You can't actually get rid of it. You can just minimize it. So you minimize it and then bring it back. It's always going to be hiding in the background. As soon as you have the CEE-LINE plugin installed, this will be lingering behind. So I will now mention there's another way to handle the draft in Hydromagic, which is I would say not the recommended option. It can get a little bit complicated when you start moving projects from one computer to another. But there is in options preferences, calibration menu here where you can put the transducer offset in Hydromagic. So you could potentially put our 1 foot transducer draft here in Hydromagic, plus we've got our 5 foot antenna height for a total of 6 foot. And so now our depth has gone up to 2.8 because we've added a transducer offset in Hydromagic. Now what we don't want to do is have a draft in Hydromagic and in the CEE-LINE. So we're getting a draft offset applied to our depths, and then we're adding it again when we bring it in Hydromagic. So that's the worst case situation because everything is going to be wrong. So what you want to do is remove that draft from the CEE-LINE itself, and so everything is now being managed just in Hydromagic. Now you might think, well, this is a little bit of a simpler way of doing it. Everything is in one place, which is true, and in many cases it would be advantageous to do it in this manner, but it just does become a little bit tricky because this offset is sometimes it's hard to keep track of when you're moving projects around from PC to PC. So it's nice to have the draft in the echo sounder because it's tied up permanently within the depth record. But they're the two ways of doing it. So whilst we're looking at the data here, we can just go through a couple of other things that might be useful to know. To download a background map from Google or Bing, you just right click here, download map, and then you can pick your source of maps. So let's say Google or Bing. Sometimes one will be better than the other. So Google Maps Satellite. And to get the actual map, we can hit calculate, and it'll be easy for us now because we have a current GPS position. So we can just hit this, use our current GPS position, our map dimensions, basically approximately the size. Essentially it just comes down to if you put a bigger number in, you get a bigger map. It won't really bear much relation to the exact number you put in there. So if you want a big map, just put a 0 on the end, and you can work up and down depending on what sort of resolution you need is. So then we can give it an output name, map, and then we hit OK to download it, which I'm not going to do because we're not in the field right now. So alternatively, you can actually type an address in. You can actually find addresses around the world. It works quite well actually. But a common way of using the download map is to use a waypoint coordinate. So if you already put a waypoint in the Hydromagic project, you can just pick that waypoint as the source for the map. So that's quite useful. As it's a brand new project, we've got no waypoints, so we can't do that. Yeah, downloading maps is quite a useful tool in Hydromagic. Just make it very simple. You can see now we have a moving map button pressed, which means the boat will always appear at the center of the screen. So if we try and move the boat around, it's going to recenter it. If you uncheck moving map, then the boat can be on the screen, off the screen, anywhere. So you could be potentially seeing all your navigation data here. You've got no boat. You say, what's going on? Well, that's because the moving map button is not pressed. So if you press that, boat's going to appear. Heading up is an option to keep the boat always facing up on the screen. It does present a bit of a challenge sometimes to the graphics on the computers, so that can be a little bit slow. So when it comes to actually recording the soundings, if I go back to the Project Explorer, we see our raw data folder here. So as soon as we press record sounding, it's going to start recording, and we're going to see down in the bottom right, we'll see this red raw 00001 indication, and also we'll see the raw 1 file started over here under the raw data folder, and on the navigation data we should see here recording and the number of records that's been recording. And whilst it's recording, you can actually right click on there here and go to digitize echogram, and we can see the echogram of what we're recording, which is kind of meaningless at this moment, but we can look at the data as it's been collected. So to stop the recording, you just press the record sounding again, and that will finalize the collection of this raw file. And then when we hit record sounding again, it's going to start the second raw file. If we hit the pause button, then it's going to stop recording. However, when we unpause, it will still be recording in the same raw file. So if you want to draw some lines to follow whilst you're doing the survey, you can do that by drawing a boundary and then filling in the sections in the boundary. So first thing to do here, we right click and draw a boundary. So in this case, I don't have a background map. If we had a map or an image that you would like to use, then you can just follow the terrain of the map or whatever you might have to draw the appropriate boundary for your survey, or you can import DXF. A few ways of doing it, but we'll just show you the rough process right here. So I'm going to draw a boundary, and so once I have the boundary, I can input sections into that. If I right click on sections, generate sections, I can choose the direction of the section. So here is where it can be useful to use the measure tool. I can just the measure tool over here, activate that, and I can say, okay, well, what is that line direction? And it's a bearing of, let's say, 74 degrees. So then I can go back into my sections here, generate sections, and put a line direction of 74 degrees. And the line interval, I can say, okay, I want a line every 50 feet, and pick the boundary that I want. And the shore distance is really for USV autopilot, so but that is going to be an offset between the edge of the boundary and the lines. So let's put that to 0, and I'm just going to call it section. Okay, so yeah, now we've got 50 lines, 50-foot lines. Now what we can do is go one step further and actually generate a route from our sections. So the routes are usually used for autopilot line plans, but it can be useful just for your regular survey planning. If we generate a route, we can create a route here, add all the sections, just select all of them. So now it generates the route. We can see here the route with on our route planner. It tells us the distance, 8 miles in this case, and the ETA, 2 hours and 35 minutes. And how does it know that? Well, you have to edit the survey speed. So you have to say, okay, I'm going to be going roughly 4 miles an hour. And then it's going to say, okay, it's going to take us 2 hours. So it can be useful to get some idea of how long it's going to take to do the job for this using the route planner. It doesn't have any impact on the data collected. Even the sections, the routes, there's not any link between those planning items and the data that's collected. The recorded sounds are not in any way linked to any of the individual sections or routes. So still recording data, so I'll turn that off. But that's pretty much the introduction to Hydromagic setup for the CEE-LINE.